So good day to everyone back in the United States, and here we are with our second interview, and today we have Felicia Marcus, and Felicia was the chair of the California Water Board for 7 years in California. She's currently the Landreth Visiting Fellow at Stanford University, where she works on water in the West. And we're really grateful to have you. Thank you for being with us today.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Well, this is fun. I'm enjoying this part of my time here in Glasgow, and we just had a couple questions for our Bay Area Air Quality Management District followers back home. So our first question for you is just a little bit about what is possible here for the globe around water policy and climate mitigation. And so we wanted to ask first, with all your knowledge and experience on California water policy, what is California doing today that makes us a global leader that can and should be emulated by other participants here at COP26?
Well, I think when it comes to water in particular, where we really are the leaders is in efficiency, at least efficiency in the first world, as opposed to efficiency in the third world, which just goes without saying. In terms of really making progress, you think about the growth of a lot of our cities, major cities, and Southern California in particular, are actually using less water than they did 10 and 20 years ago because of the massive injection of improved fixtures and appliances and all of that, but also a consciousness and a mindset. And more recently, in our last drought, the massive push to get rid of lawns, or at least lawns that are as green as a Scottish golf link in the midst of August of the worst drought in modern history. We learned that in our last drought. So I think showing that we can change is one of it. We're also becoming, and we already are, but we're going to even be bigger leaders in water recycling. We have the largest project for potable water recycling and groundwater recharge in the world in Orange County now, and in the LA area, metropolitan and the city of LA each have projects that are even bigger than Orange County. So between that and stormwater capture, a massive stormwater capture program in the county of LA, we're going to be the epicenter of climate adaptation and water in the urban context, along with San Francisco's work to deal with sea level rise by investing in terraced wetlands and nature-based solutions, which is one of the reasons why I'm here.
Yeah, so let's jump off from that. So one of the reasons why you're here, what is one of the things you're most hoping to see happen here at COP26, or one of the reasons why you joined in this mission over here in Scotland this year? What is a hope or aspiration you have for the conference?
Well, I have a few of them, and I won't say that my dreams have come true, but progress is definitely being made, and I've checked that with others who are in this the little water world. So you got water Twitter, but you also have water cop. The little sturdy.
I love that there's water Twitter.
Yeah, really, you got a little sturdy band of us. But I think many of us in water have been saying, "Hello, water. Hello, water is." And adaptation in particular. It's sort of Peter Glick, who used to run the Pacific Institute and is their emeritus, a real certified genius in the field of climate and water, said that if climate change is a shark, water's its teeth. And that's because water is the bleeding edge of where you feel climate change first, whether it's in sea level rise, or in drought, or in floods, or even in extra dry forests, which cause much more massive wildfires that have all kinds of impacts on the ground. Water is an essential part of what happens with climate change and where the pain is felt. And the world has not spent as much time on adaptation over the years in the climate change dialogue. It's been all about mitigation, and it needs to stay about mitigation and reducing fossil fuel emissions and all kinds of other methane emissions. We absolutely have to do that. But we also have to deal with water and adaptation, because people are already starting to die because we didn't act early enough, because folks were so focused on mitigation that they didn't want to talk about adaptation. They viewed it as capitulation, that somehow you couldn't, walk and talk and chew gum at the same time. So my biggest hope is that water is going to find its rightful place in this dialogue, and that nature-based solutions and adaptation are going to take their rightful place in the dialogue. And certainly in the Blue Zone and the side events, it's much bigger than it was in Madrid, and it's mentioned on the main stage, which is a big plus. So my hope is that this is a continuum where we're actually going to be talking about mitigation and adaptation at the same time, and dealing with water and energy and other emission sources at the same time.
That's really, really insightful, and I want to actually go from that to one more question about you talked about nature-based solutions, and I've had the privilege of sitting through a number of these panels, and I've listened to presentations about the Congo River Basin, about deforestation around the Amazon, and adaptation has been a big conversation about that and how we're going to adjust and who's impacted by that. What would you say are the most promising nature-based solutions? Let's put it that way. I don't want to label your words, but what are the best nature-based solutions for us to being better with water resources?
Well, there are a lot, but let me say something that what you said really brought to mind that's important. And what I learned at the Madrid COP and the Copenhagen COP, the thing that's so fascinating is in other countries, folks are talking a lot more about watershed management and integrated water management way ahead of us. We think we've invented everything and we're ahead. There are folks who've been talking about integrated water management in these international forums for 50 years. We started our program in California maybe 20 years ago, and they're in their infancy. But folks in most parts of the world think about watersheds from the top to the bottom and how you deal with the drop of water from the top to the bottom. So we have a lot to learn from other countries, whether it's in the Amazon or the Congo, or you pick a continent, and they are ahead of us in more holistic thinking. So I think that's the place we need to get to. We need to recover what we knew before we got into our silos of professionalism and excellence. Silos of excellence is another way people like to talk about it, where we do everything separately. So where we start thinking more holistically about how we get the most out of nature and our ability to manage it. So the most promising nature-based solutions, thinking from the top to the bottom in some ways, are forest management in an ecological way, not just we're going to plant more trees to sequester more carbon wherever they are and blanket something with trees. That's not a healthy ecological ecosystem. If you manage a forest so it has the kind of forest floor that allows the big trees to get better, and you don't create these potential for torches that create these catastrophic conflagrations which have consequences for life and limb but emit like just a funnel of carbon up into the atmosphere. If you manage them well, you can get multiple benefits. And if you restore the meadows, which is another place where we use nature-based solutions, all of a sudden you end up with nature's fire breaks, because all of a sudden you've got wet sponges that are absorbing it. Beaver dams, or even beaver dam analogs, nature's engineers allows the water to meander, it soaks into the soil, you get natural fire breaks, and you get habitat refugia for critters. It holds back water to release it a little bit later, which will replace at least some of the snowpack we're going to lose with climate change, which we really need to make our system work. Down at the bottom, you mix, instead of building higher and higher levees, you buy some land and you do some setbacks, and you let the water flow across the floodplain to absorb the energy of the water in a flood. You end up creating amazing habitat for fish and food for fish, etc. There are win-wins from the top of the watershed to the bottom that we've lost somehow by over-narrowing how we think. So by bringing nature-based solutions in, we can save nature and save ourselves at the same time. It's kind of incredible, and they're more resilient to shock, which is what we're going to need to do under climate change, because the extremes of drought and flood are going to be greater. You can't engineer your way out of it. People talk about the 100-year flood. Forget the 100-year flood. 100-year floods are happening every 5 years in some places. So all bets are off. And so nature's the only thing that can actually save us more economically. You get multiple benefits, and it's important to people too.
Well, that actually warmed my heart. I have a huge smile on the other side of this camera filming you right now, just as someone who deeply loves nature and knows what the value of it is. I'm really grateful to have you give us 10 minutes of your time to tell us a little bit about that, and it's inspiring to hear that if we actually just restore nature to the way it was given to us, we actually could do a lot of good to just make much of this better for ourselves. So one final question, fun fact about you is that you are a fellow Emeryville resident, and so I am extremely proud to not be the only Emeryville resident here in Glasgow. You live right down the street from me, and it's just awesome that a little tiny town like ours has multiple people here doing environmental justice work. So the big question is, where do you go for brunch on the weekends?
Rudy's Can't Fail.
Rudy's Can't Fail Cafe. So you have a number 2?
Doyle Street Cafe.
Okay, so my number 1 and 2 are flipped with you, but one way or the other, we're going to find each other out at a sidewalk cafe and continue this conversation back in Emeryville.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us, Felicia, and we'll see everybody again later this week with another interview.